Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
We're going to be talking about A Christmas Carol in prose being a ghost story of Christmas by Charles Dickens, published in 1843. Our next episode is going to be about
Joker
from
2019.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it. You can email us about Joker or anything else at whatthe@scarythoughts.org. Sign up for a newsletter, scarythoughts.org. Give us your info. We will send an email. Actually, probably not with this one because it is almost Christmas.
It's too late.
I don't think I have it in me to put together a newsletter for y'all.
Yeah, I will be in LA enjoying the Peterson Museum's sci-fi car exhibit instead of writing
The what?
The Peterson Museum's a car museum in LA, and they have all kinds of fancy old stuff and cool stuff. And right now they have a sci-fi car exhibit. So they have like the Ecto one from Ghostbusters and the Back to the Future car, and I think maybe a couple cars from Blade Runner, some Sid Mead cars.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right on. You know, usually we say, hey, warning, spoilers ahead, but it's a fucking Christmas Carol. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, this is like one of the absolute most ubiquitous stories. I mean, there's so many versions of it. There's so many versions of Dickens's version of it. Like there's like a to-read version of it that's shorter.
To be read out loud, the one,
Yeah.
What do you think it was like his version? Because I guess he read it, I think I read that he read it publicly almost 200 times.
Yeah.
It was almost like his job.
Yeah, it was his job basically for a while. Like it was in such demand. So he, it doesn't go as deep into their family history and stuff. It basically hits a little more of the high notes. If you want to hear a good version of it, Neil Gaiman reads it for New York Public Library. So if you Google some combination of those words, you will surely be able to find it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start with this one? This was your idea.
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't think that it was. I think that you said, let's do A Christmas Carol. And I said, I read that every year. And you said, great, let's do that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. How unlike me to propose something.
I was quite surprised by it. That's why I
remember.
remember.
Not antagonistic against Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I remember that specifically is because it seemed like such an unusual holiday request.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should plug our previous Christmas episodes, which I believe have been Krampus and Black Christmas. Did we do?
No, we missed it.
How long have we
one
been doing
year.
this? Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we missed it. And then we have Gremlins that we did that came out after Christmas, which is kind of a Christmas. We had planned to do it, but then it was late.
Right.
And then if you're really feeling A Christmas Carol, I re-listened to the episode Popcorn, Piss, and Vinegar I was on last year that was about Scrooged. And it's a great episode, man. I don't think you could do the Scrooged episode any better than those guys did.
Oh, cool.
So,
I have to rewatch that. I just got it to rewatch for the holidays.
It's such a weird, odd movie. It has there's three meta layers to it, where there's the movie that you're watching, and then there's the story of the dude's life, and then there's the movie that they're making in the story. And then the movie that you're watching breaks the fourth wall. It does all this weird Looney Tunes shit.
Huh.
And there's Looney Tunes references throughout the whole thing because it's Richard Donner.
That is one thing, I mean, to jump into A Christmas Carol a little, that took me aback. Okay, first of all, you had asked me, have I ever read it before? And I think my answer was not since I was a kid. And reading it last week, I realized I'd never actually read it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably think...
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people have never actually even seen a version of it all the way through. They've just seen it referenced in different media over the years.
Totally. But one of the things that was surprising to me is that there are moments where the narrator, the omniscient narrator, opines and gives character, which I thought was, I mean, it's not quite postmodern, but it is akin to that sort of strategy of breaking that fourth wall. And that was really shocking to me.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what... I mean, the narrator is essentially Charles Dickens. I mean, that's basically... I mean, you could try to tease that out in a bunch of different ways, but he's just really writing like he's telling you a story. And he really revived Christmas as a thing. This book was, at the time... I mean, people still celebrated Christmas or whatever, but there was this transition from kind of a more of an agrarian Christmas tradition to now we're all packed into cities. How are we going, because of the Industrial Revolution, how are we going to celebrate Christmas now that we're covered in ash in Brighton or wherever the fuck we're living. And then this came out and it was unbelievably successful and completely revitalized like the Christmas industry, like the Christmas industrial complex that there's the war on Christmas every year.
Yeah.
I think you could easily trace back to the popularity of this novel.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
For me, I totally want to get into notions of Christmas, but if I'd like to vote, we defer that for a little bit because I'm going to be very negative and very critical about that sort of thing. I don't want to do that all up front.
So grinchy.
I'm not, though, I swear.
Uh-huh.
But I think one thing that this story brings up for me is this concept of can a person change?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of our narratives are based on that. I mean, every romantic comedy, it seems, is based on that. Like, can the man's heart be warmed or that sort of thing? And as a central plot device of so much of the Western canon, it really made me question, well, whether people can change or not. And then if the answer is no, why it is one of the most steadfast staples of the Western canon.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like, okay, do you think people can change that radically?
I think that people do change. And the real question is, can you improve or not? And I think
what's the difference?
Well, okay, so you're going to change no matter what. Like, you're going to bust your knee, you're going to become sedentary, or you'll become more or less unhappy depending on how your life plays out, or you might suddenly become rich and be really stoked. So there are going to be influences in your life that kind of change you. And I think that it's really easy to become shittier, and it's way harder to become better. And that's kind of like in A Christmas Carol, you know, Marley's covered in the chains of his own making that he made one link at a time. And I think that that's what happens if you're not making an active decision to lead what, you know, in the context of the culture that made this story, is to become better, you know, a better person. And we all know, you know, we know what that means. You know, it's basically a Christian story.
Yeah.
And that shit takes work. And I know just from my own life, I periodically, like every few months, find myself really forlorn and despaired because I've like let go of my goals and I'm unhappy with it. Not all the time, but like, you know, this year was pretty shitty for me most of the year. And I found myself drifting into that kind of like nihilism that we talk about on the show. And then you got to bring it back. Otherwise, you're going to suck and be lame. And, you know, so far, so good. You brought it back, I guess.
Thank you from all of us to you.
Yes.
But so you think people can change and that people do change. And fair enough, you know.
I think, though, that like, do people change a lot? I mean, probably not.
Like fundamentally, I guess if you experienced a trauma, you could turn into an asshole pretty fast or become very bitter.
Mm-hmm.
But improving for the better, I guess the extension of my question, can people change, would be, can you experience a life event where your life is improved in a half-hour drama?
Yeah, so I don't think...
Like, things can be taken away from you and made worse, but can things be created for you that, or can you create for yourself a circumstance where you are suddenly generous, light of heart, open to love, whereas before you were quite the opposite?
Yeah, I mean, have you ever been drunk before? You know, like right there, you know? But the trick is maintaining it, you know? Like that's like what Ram Dass and all those guys talk about is, you know, there's so many moments where you feel like you're about to be enlightened, but it doesn't last. And the trick is making it last. And, you know, that's like the same thing with the Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning thing. It's like you have to constantly work on, I mean, I hate to say upbeat sounds so trite, but like, you know, you have to, even in a death camp, you have to try and be upbeat, or you have to try and move in the direction you want to move. And I think that you might have like a moment, like for example, in this story, maybe you do see some ghosts and the next day you're like, holy shit, everybody's getting a turkey, Nino Brown style, you know, but you know, what does 2 weeks from now look like when Scrooge is looking at his ledger and the money he's now paying his clerk is like, he's like, why the fuck am I giving this dude like 80% more than any other clerk makes? You know, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. And
the dude is still lazy. You know, like, so what does that look like a couple weeks from now, you know?
Yeah, well, okay. Proposing that art and let's say fiction has a function in our culture, could the abundance of self-improvement narratives be maybe sort of a maintenance work that it's definitely part of Western culture that things can be improved. And certainly it's part of the American character. And it's something that I should take a moment to announce to everybody that I am going to officially be an American in 3 weeks.
So exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Now you can celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, and I can commit all the felonies that I've been I have a backlog of and only have the repercussions of going to prison instead of being deported, which is worse for us Canadians.
Yeah. Well, good luck with being American.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I do really like about the American character, to be simplistic, is that there's a type of, it is connected to the cliche of American pragmatism, which is definitely part of the character, not just part of a branch of philosophy, that there's a certain kind of blind optimism that problems are to be met and conquered, that things are to be improved upon, that life gets better. That's connected to the idea of the American dream. Things will get better. You just have to work hard enough. And I feel like especially the Hollywood version of the happy ending, which is that people change. People are made better by just realizing, whether it's by some manic pixie dream girl who makes you realize that it was in your heart all along, or whatever.
Or 3 ghosts.
There's a bit of a chicken or egg thing. We sort of need these stories to remind us to do better. It's not necessarily just Christian morality to actually, I'm going to back up. This is very Christian. It's like picking up your Bible and being reminded. So whether it's, A Christmas Carol is thoroughly secular. It mentions, I think the word church appears in it twice, but otherwise it is not about baby Jesus.
Yeah, there's no reason for the season in this.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even the 3 ghosts are they're Victorian. They're not, traditionally Christian.
Right. It does roll out as a Christian morality tale nonetheless. And I wonder if we are still experiencing that, whether that's, again, in, say, rom-coms or action movies or whatever that have a happy ending where someone realizes and learns something about themselves and is made better, that these are still part of the Christian morality tale format.
Yeah. This is one of the things that that your famous atheists like Christopher Hitchens and what's his name, the guy you like, the guy that always cries, Sam Harris,
the guy who always cries.
He's always crying about something.
I've never seen him.
Not actual
figuratively.
Tears. Yeah, it's
you mean whinging?
Yeah, it's like Data from Star Trek. There's no actual tears there, but there is, wailing.
We used to be Sam Harris's favorite podcast, and now he's just never coming back.
Well, I've always consistently taken pot shots at him for some reason.
That was the last straw.
It's kind of funny. He's the only celebrity I think I've ever consistently gone after. I just find something.
Now he is crying. Is it home? Are these tears real enough for you, Chad?
I kind of just feel about him the way I feel about Dave Grohl. It's yeah, you were in Nirvana, but yeah, you used to be on panels with Christopher Hitchens, but now, I don't know.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Why did you? I'm sorry. I totally pulled that one out from under you.
Well, anyway, so one of their whole things is okay, do we have morality because it's uniquely Christian or Judaic or whatever, or would we be more moral without that stuff? And so there's often these debates. Sam Harris, he's like, look, there's just a natural morality that we probably possess because we don't want to murder each other in the way that monkeys don't tear each other's heads off all the time, except for they kind of do sometimes. So I don't know how useful it is to want to try and parse out, is this a Christian morality tale or not? Because it's the system that we live in, and that David Foster Wallace, goldfish in the water kind of thing, was what's water? What's morality? We're just kind of in it. Although it does pick up some pagan shit. Santa Claus is pagan, the Christmas tree is pagan, so it's yeah. I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, I think we've brought up the idea of religion as technology, and was it his name Harari in his books Homo Deus and Sapiens explores. The way I interpret it is he talks about religions as a sort of technology, and that's why, as we've talked about before, Christians tend to live a little longer. Actually having a belief is a sort of technology that like pushes your life into a better place,
Yeah.
almost like medicine or something like that. I'm really being simplistic, but I also wonder if Christian morality tales function similarly. And that's something I find myself up against. And I'm assuming that you do too, is there's a like, I like this stuff, but I'm suspicious of it. And that's probably actually not good for me, but that doesn't make me a believer.
Yeah. Yeah, I go around and around with this stuff myself quite a bit, especially, in the context of like sobriety literature. There's this whole concept of like, well, act as if. I know a bunch of like crusty, like God-hating leftists that are sober, like AA style. And if they've been in that for a while, they're for sure using the technology of AA.
Yeah.
And it is explicitly religious. And they've found a way to make it work for them. So it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, a lot of people get like really, a lot of your more hardcore atheists are like, well, everybody shouldn't believe in it. It's fucking stupid or whatever. Like, well, what's really the downside? People are like, oh, well, you're more gullible. It's like, okay, dude, you're an atheist that is a Elizabeth Warren supporter. I mean, where's gullibility? When you're like really all in on some politician, and I don't mean like her. That's just the first one I could think of.
Just randomly picked Elizabeth Warren.
Well, she's actually like my most favorite out of the current pack of the DNCers, and mostly because she has like a personal finance kind of thing that she's been involved for a really long time. Like, for example, my man Dave Ramsey likes her quite a bit.
Oh, that's right.
They're like buddies because they've been really working on like debt reform and like a really not just like here's your lottery ticket, Americans. Let's see who gets out of debt for free this week, like Hunger Games style or something. Like she's into like in her personal finance book, there's the advice: live on less than you make, which is a radical idea for a lot of people.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah, you fucking people. How did we get to this point? We're talking about Elizabeth Warren and Dave Ramsey.
You brought her up.
Yeah.
You brought him up.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, okay. Well, let's spin this back into the political motivations for this book. I think more than being like a Christian morality tale, this book is more about dealing with the way business dealt with the poor at its time. So so there's no mention of baby Jesus or, Mary and Joseph in the manger or any of that stuff. That's not anywhere in here. But there is, when they're talking about people dying off, they talk about the surplus population, which is a direct quote from Malthus, who was a preacher and advocate of not having a lot of people. And so like the whole Malthusian doctrine was basically like, hey, look, if we get too many people, like with life is too comfortable, there's going to be way too many people. Eventually, war, famine, pestilence, and disease is just going to self-correct, and the planet's going to drop down to a natural human population. So there were people in the 1800s who thought that was just going to be the thing. Like they were like these really cruel, shitty people who were like, man, we're just going to let the poor just fucking die off and let them deal with themselves. And if charity wants to deal with it, that's charity's business. And in this book, like Ebenezer and Marley, the first ghost that visits him, they're like believers in this. They're like, all that matters is the business side of it, and they're made miserable because of it. They have no human connections, which is the industrialists at his time.
I would love to talk about this in terms of moving away from can a person change to talking about fate.
Yep.
I mean, he questions when he's confronted with the ghost of Christmas Yet to Be. The question, is this necessarily going to happen? Well, he doesn't even know if it's him, which I think is actually very interesting to go, must this happen or can it be changed? And he doesn't necessarily know that it's him. And I think that's a really interesting, vague way for them to portray it, because it could ostensibly not be him, which means he can change his fate, but it might also actually be him. And that opens up the question, is fate malleable?
Yeah.
And are they could also just be faking it. Time is what it is, which brings up certain questions that arise in science fiction around time travel.
Yeah.
What can you change? What does it mean to glimpse the future or be able to affect the past? Can you actually shift things around? This narrative asks that. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about this, about fate and chance. Is he absolutely going to change? So is it even a choice he is making, or are the ghosts actually sort of forcing him into the way it's going to be no matter what?
Right.
Are they showing him an actual Christmas future, or are they lying to him to scare him?
Yeah.
Is it an alternate fate, or is it a fake fate to generate the inevitable choice he is absolutely going to make by being haunted by these three spirits?
Well, this is straight out of Terminator 2.
It is.
Yeah, like the whole no fate thing, like no fate but what you make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you could probably change the future if you knew, especially if there was a supernatural element. Because I was thinking about, again, back to Sam Harris, his whole like no free will thing, right? Like you're just going around in the world, events are happening, you don't have any real control over those.
Yeah.
But if there are supernatural creatures coming to look specifically at your life, then there is some order, right? And so in the context of the story, okay, there is a God. Like it's like one of those things, like it works out from this. If there's ghosts and there's Christmas is real and these three supernatural entities, or four, I guess, have enough desire to change you, it's going to make some sort of impression on you. You know, like, are you like, I mean, think about it for yourself. If you went through the same exact experience and they said, you know, even something benign, like you have to learn how to work on cars, otherwise you're going to fucking die and be sad. At the moment you met the third ghost, you go pick up a Haynes manual or something, right? Like you start, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that is also at play here is that the ghosts are asking a man of means to have agency in his life and change his ways. These ghosts are not visiting, what's his...
Tiny Tim.
Well, okay, I was more thinking of Tiny Tim's dad.
Oh, I can never remember his name.
Okay, that other guy.
Yeah.
Someone poor, impoverished, stuck, you know, where we would say has less agency. Because if we're going to talk about who can change and in what ways is a person's destiny malleable, it's like, well, whose fate is more malleable? The person who has means, the person who has privilege and more of an open ticket in their life, versus someone who has less means. It's interesting. Just follow me on this one. Did I ever talk to you, or did you see Hamlet Roulette? It was Hamlet. Do you know what I'm talking about at all? Okay. So a friend of mine, Mark Jackson, he's a theater maker, writer, director. He did this production actually in Ashby Stage. He's part of Shotgun Players oftentimes in the East Bay, where it was a production of Hamlet, but it was sort of called Hamlet Roulette. And what they would do is all of the actors knew the entire play. And at the beginning of the show, they would all line up on stage and draw the roles out of a hat.
What a pain in the ass.
Out of a skull, actually.
That shit.
It's that play is no fucking joke. But what happened is that it meant that every night the show was completely different. Some people went dozens of times because every night I got to see it twice. I wish I saw it more. And it was an entirely different play. And it was really interesting because, of course, you know, it is the penultimate play and narrative in the Western canon next to something like A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And it's been performed a bazillion times. But this is a production that every night is going to be a completely different play. It was super fascinating for so many ways. It was a great show. The performers were fucking dynamite. The reason why I bring it up is something else that it brings up is who the actors are and what they bring to these roles is not simply like, it's this actor instead of that actor. It's Robert De Niro instead of Al Pacino. It's like, what does it mean for a middle-aged black woman to be playing Hamlet? What does it mean for a young, fresh-faced white woman to be playing Polonius? What does that do to that role? So in what ways are these identities, which we're spending so much time in culture talking about as being inflexible, and it's, you know, your identity is this rock thing, but it's also a performance, and to go to this play and see, oh, Hamlet is always fucking played by the same type of person, almost always. Well, what about a production of Hamlet where nothing is fixed? Anybody can play anything. Genders don't matter. Race doesn't matter. And those actors are going to bring the bearing of their life and their life experiences to these roles. And it really, reading A Christmas Carol and thinking about fate and identity and how you can change the way you are and who you are in the world definitely reminded me of this kind of question of approaching your life with this sort of dynamism that can be played out in this art. If that only made sense to me, I apologize to everybody, but it made sense in this head. No?
Yeah, well, it was making me think of like some of what like Harold Bloom's claims about Hamlet is what made me start thinking about.
Okay.
In Hamlet, and in I think Bloom's kind of interpretation of it, like that story is so singular and interesting, and the characters are so well made, and the story is so well made, and the dialogue is so perfect that it almost doesn't matter who the players are. like so the idea, like I think from his perspective would be like if you did cast like a black woman as Hamlet, she would only be either successful as Hamlet or unsuccessful as Hamlet. And anything that you brought into it that wasn't what Shakespeare had intended was bullshit. Like, so like if you're like bolting on modern race relations onto that story because of the person's role, then that would, in Bloom's opinion, be like taking away from Hamlet. But it would also be possible, I think, under his interpretation, for Hamlet to be excellent as long as everybody like approached it with effort. Which I'm not saying that like I agree with any of that or whatever.
I think the intention of a playwright is a very questionable thing.
And I think
because you're creating something to be interpreted, and something can be completely way off in left field. But I am talking about a circumstance where it's like, let's consider that in his time, only men were playing these roles anyway. So already we're throwing into question what an actor is supposed to do with this material.
Yeah, I think that like just even that history, like that men played all the female parts, it sort of makes it would sort of not matter unless you started changing parts of the story, like Hamlet's pregnant or whatever, you know, like because it's female. Like I think you're either just playing, you're almost like playing these like archetypes when you take on a role like that. I think that he would probably, I looked around to see what he would say about Christmas Carol, and it's just generally just like, Dickens is great. This was made for money, you know, and that's another thing I was thinking about with Christmas Carol is like, he went on like kind of a Christmas novel rampage. Like there's several other Christmas books, and there was like this pressure to come out with one every year.
So you've read all the Dickens Christmas stories?
I just read A Christmas Carol and whatever comes in that Penguin Classic edition. So like all the little short stories.
That might be all of them. How are the other ones?
They are all, they feel less timeless than A Christmas Carol does, but they're all excellent. You know what I mean? Like they're like, they feel a little more Victorian, I guess. Or, you know, the one of them is about how a man is able to wipe away all of his bad memories, and he thinks it's going to make him a better person, but it actually makes him a more terrible person. And he goes around and is a total fucking asshole, and he can also make other people forget the bad things in their lives, and they also become total assholes. And then eventually through supernatural means he realizes that where he was at before is the way to go, and Christmas is saved.
The question of A Christmas Carol being timeless, in so many ways it is, but it is also unquestionably peppered with the getting jiggy with it of like 1843. It's just these weird, anomalous, like almost like a pop cultural reference for us is.
Yeah, there's all kinds of jokes.
He drops these arcane, weird references.
Yeah.
That must have been delightful if you were hip to what was going on in London that year.
Yeah, it reminds me of like you think about like Home Alone 2, for example. There's a Donald Trump cameo.
Right.
Which at its time means one thing, and now it means something completely different.
It means I don't want to watch that movie ever.
Right. But eventually, like if you know, Donald Trump had become forgotten or whatever, that cameo ceases to make sense. You're like, who is this guy? Like,
right.
Yeah, it just, and especially old like movies where the joke is the cameo, like you turn around and there's Billy D. Williams or whatever, like there's a lot of that in this book. Like, for example, I think the very last paragraph has this pun, which is about how he followed the Temperance League's advice and never had traffic with spirits again. And, you know, like you have to know that was like a teetotaler organization, and then spirits is alcohol and the ghost. It's just a goofy joke that it'd be like making a PETA joke today or something. And then 100 years from now, people don't know what PETA is.
Because they all have lost.
Yes.
and be forgotten.
It'll just be nothing but murder on Earth, as per usual.
Something that also occurred to me about this is that these ghosts in this story are being used as a form of morality, and ghosts are not like that so much in our narratives now. I mean, sometimes they are, but really, if you think of contemporary ghost stories, they're like Japanese horror movies that are just pure chaotic evil,
Right.
or American ghosts that just are fucked up and most ghosts today are selfish. They want to damn you.
They're avenging.
Or avenging. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas these ghosts are trying to bring goodness into the world.
Right.
And to correct a man's heart.
Yeah, like, Marley is basically trying to get his closest friend, who's not really that great of a friend, but like the person he was closest to not go his route, to not become miserable and pained like he is. So, like, good job, Marley. Well, let's see. Hopefully you'll turn around and earn your wings or whatever fucking weird thing you got going on.
Yeah.
And then the other ghosts, they're really kind of like more like spirits. Like the Ghost of Christmas Past in this is like very pagan. And, the other ones are too, really.
Yep.
And it's like, what's their game? Like you brought out this amount of supernatural horsepower to turn this one dude's mind around. Like what, like because he's so influential, or he's like the hub of all these other people's lives?
Yeah, it reminds me of, I'm not even going to ask you if you've seen it because I know the answer is no, but Patton Oswalt has this bit that was turned into an animation on YouTube, but it's not necessarily that funny, but it's noteworthy.
Like all of his work.
Disagree. So he talks about there's this song called Christmas Shoes by this Christian band New Song. And the song is basically this guy's in line buying Christmas gifts, and there's this little kid in front of him who's buying these shoes alone in the thrift store, and goes to the counter, and he doesn't have enough money to pay for the shoes. And he's saying to the clerk, I want to buy these shoes because my mama's very sick and she's going to die, and I want her to look good for Jesus. And so the man pays for the shoes and I guess summarizes it in the final verse that this child must have been sent here to me to remind me of generosity in the Christmas season or something like that. And Patton Oswalt is rightfully like, really? So
he's ruining Christmas for the child to make Christmas
like
special for
murdering this woman and giving her an incurable disease and leaving this kid motherless and destitute so that you could just be a little more generous this Christmas season. It reminded me of that. What God will do to make people a little more ethical.
Yeah.
Or ghosts.
Yeah.
Which is not so godly, I suppose.
Yeah,
Depending on what branch of Christianity you believe. A lot of Christians believe in ghosts and angels and shit like that, and it's really bananas. Or angels that will like come and do shit for you.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry for the tangent, but I am very perplexed about tangential Christian belief systems that seem to be unflappable, like Christians who believe in the reality of ghosts and angels that guide your hand and shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, the whole like personal guardian angel thing is so weird because like when you look at like angels in the Bible itself, they are war machines. They come down to destroy fucking everything. Like, here's my flaming sword. Sorry, people of this area. You have been canceled by Yahweh. And then I think that's like the movie The Prophecy kind of has that angle. It's like, if you saw an angel, you should fucking run because they're bloodthirsty, murderers.
Yes.
Pretty good. That movie has a good cast.
I never
Christopher
saw
Walken
it.
as Gabriel, and then Viggo Mortensen is the devil. I haven't seen it so long. I'm hesitant to go watch it again, but I remember it being a very, very cool movie. Yeah, all that weird shit though, most of it comes from like the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was this like great revivalist movement, and there were so many preachers out there from what I've read, some of them would just get up and just start riffing, and all of a sudden, they've added like some component to their preacher story, there's like, yeah, and God has an angel for every single one of you, and all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, and it reminds me a little bit of that Ricky Gervais movie, the Invention of Lying.
I never heard of it.
Oh man, okay. So I love movies that have like one little conceit to like, oh, what if you lived every single day over and over again, like Groundhog Day or Time Traveler's Wife? Like, what happens if you bounce around? So,
did I bring up Time Traveler's Wife?
Oh, you haven't, but
I meant to, because that's also another version of like, what is fate? What can you do about it?
Totally.
Answer is nothing.
What was I just talking about? What movie?
Ricky Gervais.
Oh yeah, The Invention of Lying. So in the movie, no one has ever lied ever. Like, so no one knows what it is. And then Ricky Gervais can all of a sudden lie. And he's like, oh, you look great today. And somebody's like, oh, do I really? And they like believe it. But he gets to a point where somebody dies and he basically, this little boy is crying and he's like, oh my God, your grandmother's gone. He's like, no, she's still someplace good in, a faraway place where she's gone. He's basically talking about heaven, and he makes it up. And in this world, because nobody knows about lying, they take everything he says as like the truth. And they're like, well, he said it, so he must know. And he becomes like this weird religious figure in them. It's a really funny movie. But I think a lot of that what I always call like trailer park Christianity, where you're like, you go into a tarot reader who's like my family, like we're going to win the lottery, and Jesus is going to bring us money. And like, you don't go to church. So like, why, like, what's the deal? Like, you just watch the 700 Club all day. It's not the fucking same. Yeah, I don't know. American religion is so weird.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tradition. Mm-hmm. You had brought up the way that A Christmas Carol reinvigorated Christianity, and certainly hit at a time when, Christmas trees were being introduced into English tradition, imported from Germany. Mm-hmm. That's sort of what you were talking about, right? The way in which Christmas Carol sort of like reinvigorated Christmas as this holiday. And it's funny researching Christmas traditions or wedding traditions or any traditions that we sort of take for granted, and discovering that almost all of them, the year that they were introduced into the popular consciousness, they were called traditional. Does that make sense? Like a white wedding dress was a thing that Queen, I don't remember, did once, and literally was deemed this is traditional. Mm-hmm. The first time someone did that as generating a meme, and how much traditions that we regard as, well, that's traditional. Mm-hmm. The first time it was done, someone called it traditional, and that's part of why it stuck.
Yep.
Whether it's Valentine's or Christmas trees or whatever. And that's part of, I shit on tradition a lot on this podcast, and that's part of my suspicion of it, is that the origins of traditions are often dubious and marketed. And at this point, the concept of traditional is inextricable from capitalism in a way that's not necessarily a good thing. Tradition is used to sell and keep people behaving in predictable manners more than they're doing inherent good.
Yeah, well, every tradition has a shopping list,
Well put.
But yeah, I mean, I think about traditions sometimes, like, why is this even a thing? And it must have just been really fun that one time, and it became a thing.
Yeah.
Like my buddies, we go on this, and we've done it 2 years in a row now, and it's threatening to happen for a third year, which is this annual motorcycle trip down to Anza Borrega. And it was just really fun the first time. And then the second time, it wasn't as fun, but it had different elements that were interesting. So we're hoping to see how it goes the third time. Maybe we'll try a different location, change it slightly. But I think also people are like cyclical, so they want to do the same thing the way they did the year before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any Christmas traditions? Do you do
Zero.
anything?
No, I'm just too fucking cynical to... If someone invites me to the same thing yearly, I will be there because I love that shit, but I don't feel the need to reproduce a tradition. I guess my cynicism about tradition also It just further extends to the way in which tradition is wielded almost in a moralistic way. Like, this is tradition and therefore it is inherently good.
Yeah.
So much of the American political landscape is falling prey to that, well, these are our traditional values. It's like, well, those values actually were made up by someone who told you they were traditional. Are they functional? Are they good? Do they do anyone any good? Because calling it traditional doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
It just means you're used to it. And I understand when people are genuinely finding their traditions in peril, that it's worth questioning why traditions are being taken away.
It's usually Obama, right?
Well, it was.
He's usually taking away all the traditions.
Yeah, I mean, the war on Christmas is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Like, I'm used to a thing a certain way, therefore it is inherently good.
Right. Yeah. It's like there's a...
And the thing is, your grandparents were sold that thing in the first place, and you just inherited it. It doesn't mean shit.
Yeah. Somebody told me, like, traditions are just guilt trips from the past.
Good enough.
You know, and yeah, there's something about that. Like, Crystal and I, we're starting what we hope will be a tradition for us this year. We're doing the real deal Jewish Christmas. We're going out to Chinese food, Christmas Eve. We're going to see a movie on Christmas Day, and we're going to do it in LA with a bunch of other Jews. Awesome.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I can't wait. And then next year I want to do the same thing in New York. So we decided that we wanted to start doing Jewish Christmas in a different location every year. That was going to be our thing. And I could not be happier to have and that's going to be our own little
awesome.
personal tradition.
That sounds fun.
We're going full on double income, no kids. You know, we'll send off holiday Christmas baskets to everybody and hit the road, you know. And I could not be more stoked for that.
That sounds great.
And I want to, like, defend it as a tradition too. So that's like, you know, we haven't even done it yet. This is like the first year. And I'm so excited about it that I want it to become a permanent thing. And yeah, if it works out, great. You know,
you're going to fight for your right to do it next year.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like, this is tradition.
I'm going to do it even if it's myself next year. I'm just be like, check you later.
So do you think you could be scared into changing your ways?
Fuck yeah, dude. I'm terrified by, like, seeing people I know age into retirement without any money. Like,
but
my
that's something you
parents.
already believe. So, okay.
No. I'm saying, like,
sorry.
as soon as I started seeing, like, the reality of the math, I got scared into, like, being interested in, like, Dave Ramsey and Chris Hogan and all those personal finance guys. Like, it is fucking terrifying what my parents are going through right now, just from, like, just being, like, living wild, doing whatevs, like, not saving anything. I mean, I want to buy a motorcycle right now. I want 8 machine guns and a bunch of crazy shit. But, like, and in the past, I would have just gotten myself whatever. Like, I got a new job that came with, like, a pretty good pay raise. In the olden days, I would have spent that on performance motorcycles and cocaine. But now, I'm, like, looking at, you know, 401k distributions and stuff like that, you know, like, and it's pure terror.
I'm loving that the thing that's keeping you from filling a gun locker full of rifles is just sensible economics.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Okay, but I guess my question, point taken, but I guess my question is, do you think right now something could happen to you in the next 24 hours that would scare you into changing who you are right now? So I'm not saying what could you be changed into, but do you think that you could do a 180 on some fundamental part of your life out of fear?
I think about this all the time, like, constantly. Because, like, in the Bible, to me, one of the most insane stories, the most interesting stories is the Apostle Paul on the road to Saul, or Paul, I can never remember, on the road to Damascus. Basically, there was this Roman character who was in the business of just killing Christians, and he's on a horse, and he's going to Damascus, and then, you know, in the story, God says, "What are you doing, dickhead?" and knocks him off the horse. And he wakes up, he's like, okay, I guess I'm a preacher now. And it's a major conversion moment. And he goes on to become, like, one of the greatest saints of the church or whatever. But I think about, like, what level of event it would take to make that change. You know, like, do you have to see, like, it makes it seem, in the Bible, it makes it seem almost like the Monty Python God, you know, where it's like God with the crown looks down from the cloud. It's like, what are you doing down there? Like, that's exactly what the story's like. That would probably make me change my mind on something. But then it's like, okay, what level of like, I don't know, maybe like, yeah, I don't know what the line would be.
Yeah.
You know?
It also makes me think of the way people talk about, let's say, psychedelics, like how life changing it is.
I
And it's
don't
like,
think it
yeah,
is.
but you're still the same. Like, okay, an easy. There's a lot of memes about, Joe Rogan. The final panel is, yeah, but you smoked DMT though.
Yeah.
And it's like Joe Rogan. I don't think any amount of ayahuasca or DMT is going to make him anything other than the exact same person he was before having his ego turned inside out by psychedelics.
It's amazing, like how much faith, and I mean it in like the religious sense of the word, like people have in psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've done all of them, and I don't feel any profound change. And like I went looking for profound change for that shit, And then everybody always rolls out the same sort of conditions you experience in like miracles related to the Christian church. Like, oh, you prayed and nothing happened? Well, you just didn't have enough faith. Or you didn't bury the right saint upside down, or you didn't say the correct mantra or whatever. Or, you let unpure salt into your house. Or like there's all these bullshit things that would affect the outcome of somebody's...
I'm sorry, unpure salt, you got it, what?
Yeah.
Did you just make that up? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Who knows?
I was hoping you had a new one for me.
I mean, who knows? It might be a thing that I read about a long time ago. I don't know. But people, I'll say something like, I've had this conversation multiple times in the last couple of months where somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm doing a lot of work with psychedelics. And in my mind, I'm like, you still seem like you suck in exactly the same ways. So I know you think you've probably done a lot of work, but you seem like the same asshole to me. And if this shit was as groundbreaking as you say it was, it should change you, but it seems not to have. But that's somebody else's journey in their head. Sure. I don't know what's changed. But they always come back with, well, did you have a spirit guide with you when you did it? Or did you do the work afterwards or whatever? It was like, I thought this shit was magic. Like if I have to go back and just do the work anyway, then you should just go to do the work. You don't need the supernatural kickoff thing. You should just go do it. And that's what I think about in the context of that Saul story is there's often a lot of stuff in my brain I wish I was doing. I'm like, oh man, I wish I was the kind of person that did this. And if only something would make me. And it's like, actually, I could just go do that thing. And I think that's where people like wait around for the miracle and it's bad,
You're not a big proponent of psychotherapy, are you?
I am against all forms of therapy out of ignorance and rage more than anything else.
So how do you think change can come about if not through psychedelics or therapy? Like what? So or obviously work, but how does that work even start? Like where do you think the switch happens?
I think that it's like you have to make it's again back to the AA thing. You have to make every decision, every moment you're making a decision that makes you go in a certain direction in your life. And you have a choice whether or not to eat pizza or a kale salad. Like, you have agency over your life, and I think that sometimes it could be very helpful to have a guide, like somebody who's been down the road. For me, for example, it would probably be like for like personal finance or whatever. It'd probably be like Dave Ramsey. I look at that dude's code basically, and then there's psychotherapists have codes for you to behave. Like, well, what if you did this, or what if you? I don't know. Anything I'm going to say now sounds stupid in my interpretation of what psychotherapy is, but I think it can be helpful to have someone help you. I think ultimately, if you don't do the work, and I think that can mean a lot of different things for different, don't yell at your wife, or maybe you go eat better, or you go get the job as a nurse you've always wanted, but you have to take action. Like you can't just think about it. There's always action involved.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could send me 3 ghosts to get me to change my ways, what would they be, and what would be that 180 for me that you're in charge of the ghosts? You're opening the vault.
Number 1 is the ghost of no more techno music. I would send it to my wife's house as well, or my wife. That's where I live too. But the whatever makes you people love electronic music, I would scare it out of you.
You people. Oh, you know what? I want to take this moment to say that it was recently brought to my attention that Claude Young, who, God, I hope you're listening, Claude, who is one of the greatest living electronic music artists, whose DJ Kicks mix completely is for me the peak of techno, of minimal electronic music. He's one of the main stays of Detroit techno. Listens to our podcast, which blows my fucking mind.
I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit here. I don't really hate all electronic music. There's actually quite a bit of it I
dial
do
it
like.
Back.
But anything that involves goths and electronic, I'm still totally against. But I was not familiar with Claude Young until you mentioned him, and then we follow each other on Instagram. I was like, oh, like this guy, he's a legit sci-fi nerd. And I went and listened to his music on Spotify. That guy fucking rules.
Yeah.
Like he's like the real deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. But 3 ghosts that get you to do something. One, as an anarchist, I don't really want to get anyone to do anything, to be honest.
You're an anarchist now?
I've always been.
What?
In the way that I don't like anyone to tell me what I should do.
Oh, it's not a politics, it's an ethos.
No, yeah, for sure. It's more like I resist any and all intrusions upon what I should be doing.
Chaotic neutral.
Yeah. I don't know. 3 ghosts.
Well, I think this is probably a really unfair way to corner you and go, hey, you know that voice in your head that's like, you know what Mark's fucking problem is? He just... And then just make some ghosts out of that.
I mean, I
news.
Get that. It's hard for... Yeah, I don't really think about a lot about...
Or just be like the ghost of Dave Ramsey, the ghost of Dave Ramsey, and the ghost of Susie Orman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess...
It'd probably do me a lot of good.
I mean, I'm so resistant to being prescriptive about other people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's one of the things that keeps me from being completely intolerable. You know, but it also keeps me from helping people too. Because I'm like, hey, that was your thing that you did. I mean, probably okay. Here would be one: the ghost of don't go into student debt. That would be for sure one.
Yeah,
I would send a ghost. I would show you what it meant, and I would probably try to get. Yeah, I don't know, man, because it's okay, what is the positive outcome from it?
Yeah,
you know, I just want you to be happy.
Thanks.
And enjoy your life, which you seem to be doing a pretty good job of.
I am.
So
it's just money's the only thing.
Yeah, I guess I would just send you a ghost of the future that told you what the lottery ticket numbers were for tomorrow. That's probably what I would do.
Thanks.
I would just be like, hey man, here's some numbers from a ghost that'll help you get rich, which sounds a lot like cryptocurrencies.
Oh my God. You love Christmas, right?
Love it. I fucking love it. I love everything about it.
So how do you reconcile that with the fact that you're sort of the heathen, basically? How do you reconcile this this ostensibly Christian holiday and its traditional meaning with loving it nonetheless? How do those play off each other for you?
Yeah, well, I don't dislike the stories, you know, even the traditional Jesus stories. For example, I'm not Hindu, but I love the story of Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
You know, so I can appreciate that. The Christmas I really quite like is the reinterpretation of the Norman Rockwell Christmas that occurred in the 80s. That's really Christmas for me. So a Home Alone movie or Gremlins or this sort of cynical about the media. Scrooge to me is a perfect Christmas movie. I absolutely love it. And then I get sappy, man. I love Christmas. I love the Ronettes Christmas album. Even though I've only seen Snow on the Ground a couple times, I like the idea of a National Lampoon Christmas story, Christmas with snow on the ground and lights. I like everything about it. I like that it makes me feel like I want to be a better person during the holidays.
That's great.
Yeah, because I know it's really hard for a lot of people. So, you know,
to be good.
Well, that, but also Christmas is just hard for a lot of people.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah.
Do you guys exchange gifts?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Why? Of course.
Because my wife likes things.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I always call it my nightmare third quarter because her birthday, Christmas, and our anniversary are all within 40 days.
Oh.
So it's a very expensive time for me.
It's funny. Monique and I don't exchange gifts for any occasion ever.
I am so in
decades.
favor of that. I think that exchanging gifts is fucking stupid.
To be fair, how do I put this? we try to have the attitude of we just be generous to each other all the time, but obviously we don't practice that as well as I think the intention sounds like it is. Because I think we're pretty generous with each other, but we don't actually buy each other gifts for no goddamn reason regularly at all either. So I think we just, just try to go have a nice meal once in a while.
I don't know. Well, the type of gift I like to get my wife is like something that I know she wants, but would be a little outside of what she would feel comfortable spending on herself for that thing.
That's good.
Her reaction to that is worth getting it to me.
That's cool.
Like and that's the joy of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you? You guys don't like Christmas? You don't celebrate Christmas?
I actually quite like Christmas.
What about
I just
Christmas
don't.
movies?
Some of them are good. I hate Christmas music. All of it completely. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. I fucking hate it so much. Christmas movies, I like Christmas movies. They're nice. Christmas Story I've seen, God only knows how. Maybe I've seen Christmas Story more than any other movie. Actually,
I think that might.
Maybe.
I think I would for sure say I've seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show more than that, just because I know I have a count.
Of course.
But that movie would be definitely a close second.
Yeah. And it's great, and I've never not. I like it more every time I see it.
Yeah,
somehow.
I kind of want to go to visit the Raymond Buckland Museum. In Cleveland, because
you should. We actually have a listener, Stephen Intermill. He is or was the director of the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, but he was the curator of the A Christmas Story House Museum for years.
Yeah.
And
so he does, so the Buckland Museum, it was a thing, right? And he acquired the collection relatively recently in the last couple of years. And they have a badass shirt. I have it. Like there's like I think there's a picture in our Instagram feed of me wearing it, but it's like this total like 60s Age of Aquarius design for it. But he has, Raymond Buckland, of course, invented modern witchcraft. I invented is probably like a loaded word in that thing. Anyway, but he has all kinds of rad shit in this museum, and it's in Cleveland, I think, and as is the Christmas Museum. But he said if we came out to visit him, I could hold the Red Ryder BB gun, which I feel like that trip would be worth it just for that. But he's going to be out here at in February for some sort of pagan convention that takes place somewhere.
Steven, come say hey.
Yeah, definitely. He's going to be in San Jose, but he asked if there was any witchy stuff that we knew of out in the Bay Area.
Nothing I can talk about on mic.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured we'd get a message to him about what sort of devil's anus kissing antics you're up to.
Whoa.
Yeah, I saw Haxon with you last week.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. There was some devil ass kissing.
There was. Not in the movie, not me. Well, I like that despite our two very different sort of like brands of cynicism and very idiosyncratic subjective wars against nihilism that we seem to be waging every day, that are they're very different, but they're there. Yet Christmas delights us all.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's like the Adorno culture industry thing. It's like the holiday that was designed to appeal to as many people as possible. It's loaded with nostalgia. I finally broke down and watched one of those The Toys That Made Us episodes on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's this documentary series about one of them is about Star Wars toys. That's the one I watched. And I realized like Christmas to me is so interconnected with getting toys as a child that were Star Wars toys. Like that. It's interesting how like Christmas nostalgia blends with Star Wars nostalgia, and that like I'm going to see the new Star Wars movie Christmas Day. Like we already got tickets for it, which I'm sure will be terrible because this whole series has been terrible. But
I have nothing for Star Wars. The whole thing is a mystery to me.
Did you not grow up? I mean, obviously,
of course.
I
had fucking posters and a lightsaber. I think I had a lightsaber, but I definitely had the action figures and shit. But so what?
I mean, you have a gang of electronic equipment in your house.
Oh yeah.
And you were of the age. It seems like you would like Star. Why do you think you didn't like Star
Wars? No, I liked
it
at the time, but then I fucking grew up and realized that records of Sharon Lowson Bram singing children's songs and Raffi albums and Sesame Street and Star Wars are not for me. I've got other things to do.
What about The Mandalorian? Have you watched The Mandalorian at all?
No. I mean, I could at some point because I love an action movie but I don't care.
It's basically a 1950s cowboy show
That's fun.
Dressed up as
I'll
a
watch
Star Wars
that.
show.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah. And then there's the Baby Yoda, which
Which I've fucking
about.
seen plenty of course.
Yeah. And Werner Herzog is in it, so there's that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like Thanksgiving more than Christmas.
That's fucking crazy to me.
Because it's simple. It's like, go fucking have dinner with your family. Don't be an asshole. Just go have dinner with your family. That makes sense to me. And if you can't see your family, get together with a bunch of your friends and just fucking get along and just work out your stupid dietary restrictions and bring something delicious and enjoy each other's company and don't be an asshole. Christmas is just there's just too much going on. There's too many chaotic obligations that I can't track and don't adhere to, and it's messy.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. Anything else about? Have we talked about A Christmas Carol much?
I mean, there's so many.
I think I talked about Hamlet more than I talked about Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things written about this story and about like just Dickens in general, and we could have probably gone into like all kinds of weird like biography stuff about Dickens. But
I love Charles Dickens. I haven't read a lot of him, but I think he's amazing.
Yeah. A lot of times what he's doing is like he's making this morality play kind of. I think the person who's like actually closest to him in literature, to my mind, and real ultra popular is maybe like Neil Gaiman. Like some of his books have kind of like a moral, like a very specific Neil Gaiman-y moral path. I'm thinking more of his novels than maybe I'm specifically thinking about the Graveyard Book, which involves a kid and ghosts. So,
I just sent that to one of my nieces as a Christmas gift.
Yeah, yeah. That book had like an interesting start too, where he's like, "What if the Jungle Book took place in a graveyard?" Like, awesome. Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
we've often brought up the issues that surround moralizing in texts. Mm-hmm. And this is about as heavy-handed a morality tale as you can get. Like there's just no vagary. It's just one straight line to putting the thumb down on making this guy change his ways to being a better person in a very specific way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't rub me the wrong way that so many others contemporary morality plays do for some reason, and I don't think I know why.
I think it's just excellently written. I mean, I think just the thing that is great, no matter what it's really trying to do, you're going to have some reaction to it. I mean, you know, for example, Eat, Pray, Love, which we just did an episode about. Like, I think that if that book had not been written with the skill that it was written with, and I've mentioned this to other people, and people are like, "What? You think that book's well written?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. It's fucking really technically sound." If it was even slightly less well written, it would be completely intolerable, you know?
Totally.
And I think Christmas Carol is probably the same way. I mean, there's all kinds of terrible Christian morality, like anything Kirk Cameron has ever worked on. You know what I mean? It's just awful. It has the same moral foundation, but it is cheesy. But the other thing, though, is like, is it so wrong to read something and want to feel better after you've read it? Like, you know, like I read this and I felt better for a couple of days. I was like, what elements in my life are Scroogey that I could change to have a better outcome? Like, could I unlink the chains that I've formed myself?
Exactly, but I couldn't come up with an answer, so that's why I had to ask you.
You couldn't figure out a way to unchain yourself?
Yeah, so that's why I had to ask you to provide me with some ghosts.
You wanted the three.
You didn't do shit. You just
you
totally failed me there because you don't tell people what to do.
Yeah, but you're also right though. It's the kind of thing. It's like what should I be doing? And I mean, if I was going to be pretty prescriptive, it would probably. It's weird. Like, okay, I could probably advise you on some career shit, you know, but you could end up where I was over the last 3 years, which is really unhappy. Like I'm really lucky that I didn't have more bad health outcomes or whatever from as miserable as I was over the last 3 years. And like, I mean, I'm only a week into this new job, but it feels fucking great. And so if I it's always that monkey's paw thing is always in my brain, right? So say I told you to go like learn, you know, Ruby on the Rails or something like that, and you did, and then you went and worked for a shitty company but you got used to the money, and then all of a sudden you bought yourself a bunch of stuff that was harmful to you. You know, like I don't know, how does that work?
I think that's the gift of the Magi, which is also a Christmas.
Oh
tale.
yeah,
It's not the gift of the Magi, but basically, it's like that's the problem with giving people advice or steering them too hard. Is being responsible for their outcome is kind of none of your business. This is something Monique and I talk about a lot, is when we see someone going through something that is bad for them.
right.
At what point do you step in? At what point do you insert yourself into the situation unasked? At what point are you being a good friend by staying out of it versus being a bad friend by not interceding?
Yeah,
It's a very difficult thing to navigate because you want to be a good friend, but it's hard to know at what point interfering in someone else's life or telling them what to do or believing you're holding up a mirror to what they're doing, if that's actually ever acceptable or at what point it's acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, if you really love somebody and you see that they're really fucking up, I mean, you see that show Intervention all the time is the most dramatic representation of it possible. And then I wasn't at the intervention moment, but I had a couple people die. You know, like Crystal and I had some people in our life die over the years. You know, and one pretty recently, and then another one of my friends is and probably still is fucking off pretty bad. You know, drug related, and ran up his parents' credit cards like $70,000, like ruined their retirement, like a whole deal, just really bad. And I did the thing where it's like you have to get help, or it was like you have to go to a program, or we can't be friends. And I haven't talked to him since. And then I think about it all the time. It's like, well, now I just don't have this dude in my life as if he had died anyway, you know?
Right.
And the game with that is you're hoping to accelerate the person's hitting bottom so that they get help before they die.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, some people disagree with that, but I mean, that's the only way I've seen anybody actually get sober is through that program. You know,
Totally.
Like, I mean, I don't know anything else that works. Maybe there's this stuff. I mean, as someone who doesn't drink and didn't go to a program, I guess I'm like the obvious example of maybe you don't need it or whatever. But like, I for sure have other issues.
You're the anomaly.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's just I just don't like alcohol. Like that's a huge like the actually drinking it and the way you feel from it is not appealing to me. So there it went.
Yeah. Oftentimes the thing of giving someone advice, at least in the circles we run in, it's about drugs and alcohol, right?
Yeah.
But I also question whether or not I am, and maybe Monique is because she's very similar in lifestyle, I might be the absolute worst person to go like, hey man, you got to get it together. Love you. Got to not drink and do drugs so much because I am such this example of moderation. You know what I mean? Like I'm a bartender who I challenge anyone to name one time they've seen me drunk. You know, I haven't been to the bottom and come back. I've just never been inside it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The only thing I've really been successful with changing people, and this is a perfect example. I think most people they just want to hear you tell them something that's going to affirm what they're thinking. Like most people just want what they're doing to be affirmed, you know, like, so for example, there's probably been dozens of people in my life, like mostly bartenders, who have like been like, oh, I think I need to go finish my degree, or I want to go to school. I never went. And this is one of the things that I was very successful with was I went to City College for a couple of years, figured out this weird like track into the UC system that you basically go for free. Like there's like this like method of doing it. And I talked to dozens of people about it. 3 people did it. Like, you know, so part of me is just like, yeah, I could tell you what I think you should do, but it's probably going to be wasting my breath, you know, like, and you're not going to do it. And then whatever. Like I never ask anybody for advice about anything.
Yeah.
And part of it is...
I feel like I ask people for advice all the fucking time. It's just a question of whether I listen or not.
Yeah, I never ask people for... And part of it is like... You remember The Ultimate Warrior? The wrestler?
No. I don't know anything about wrestling,
okay.
really.
So there was a wrestler called The Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
And he was really big in the 80s. And he was fucking wild. And later on in life, he kind of became like an Alex Jones sort of dude. Like he was very weird and had all these like very specific ideas about the government or whatever. And he was also a motivational speaker of sorts. And but there's an interview with him, or he's on some show, and this kid comes up to him and says, "Hey man, what advice do you have for me?" And he goes into this crazy speech. He's like, "You should never ask anyone for advice because within you there is a spiritual needle that tells you where to go, and you either do or don't listen to that voice." And I kind of believe that because they're like, I just don't believe other people's advice is right for other people. You know, like my path isn't somebody else's path. Like, I'm not going to tell somebody to like stop drinking and go to city college and don't go anywhere for years until you have a degree. Like that, it worked for me. It might not work for somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on it also depends on what you want. You know, like I wanted a professional career because nobody I grew up with really kind of had one. You know, like I wanted to do what I'm doing right now, which is be an ad exec type dude pitching silly ideas like the movie Funny People. Like that's exactly what I wanted to do, and now I'm kind of doing that. And it took fucking forever to do that. Like it was almost impossible for me.
Yeah.
So go listen to your own fucking voice and do that shit. That's what I would say.
Listen to the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
And his needle.
Yeah.
Should we go to emails?
Yeah.
We got an email from our friend Cameron Marquez.
Hello.
What's up? Okay. What are some of the graces that aging has brought you guys? Best of luck as we all transition from the corporeal to the inexplicable. That's amazing. Yeah, so aging and grace.
Nothing. Like absolutely nothing. I found that
I feel like this is spilling right out of talking about advice too, right? Because it's a bit like, so what do you have for us?
Yeah. I mean, I don't find like there's definitely like time in the game, you know, like things. It's just like I've learned things that I wouldn't do mostly, like, or how not to do things. But there's no advantage to being physically older in any way.
What about mentally older? I mean, obviously you don't get wisdom just because you've been around longer. It's not that easy. But I don't know. I think there's a chicken or egg thing that I've experienced with aging, which is that I've mellowed out a lot over the years, especially around questions of anger, for example. I'm a lot less angry than I used to be. I used to be really fucking angry a lot and quick to it. And I'm less so now. And it's hard for me to decide for myself if that's something I should congratulate myself over because I did so much hard work, or if I'm just older and those chemicals and hormones are just less now. I mean, I've joked about this of wishing I had lower testosterone.
Yeah, this is you and Dominic from Literary Libations theory that like lowered testosterone was like actually the answer for people being able to deal with life better.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if my testosterone's actually lower.
It for sure is.
Yeah?
I'm just kidding.
I don't can everybody smell it?
But I mean, you're over 40. It like every moment
totally happens.
over 40.
Well, but how much does it? Well, has it happened so much that it has definitively changed my behavior? Is kind of what I'm thinking of. It's like, wow, I'm so much less angry all the time.
Have you cried at a movie in the last year?
Fucking, I cried reading fiction this morning.
Definitely low testosterone.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. So, I mean, again, this goes back to people changing and all that, the graces of aging, or graces that potentially come with aging. It's always been this thing that I'm unsure of as I get older and I just have more and more and more years to sort of look back on and who I've been and how I've changed and phases I've gone through and what my personality and habits are like. How much of those have been dictated by circumstance and how much of them have been dictated by me making active choices unrelentingly until the outcome is different versus circumstances that I can't even track. And that would be something like biochemistry and hormones. Like I don't know how much, again, I hope I'm not repeating myself, I'm merely elaborating. Being less angry all the time, how much of it is me doing the work and how much of it is me just getting older and my chemistry is different. Or I'm just tired. I'm just too tired to fucking be angry and it's just easier to chill the fuck out.
Yeah.
And be less hostile.
And also I feel like I'm answering this question in a really irritating, like way, and where like I think of there's time that you've just learned how to do things better, but there's also like aging, which I would say aging is a consequence of time, but not the same as time.
Yeah.
So I would say anything that is moving me into a state of aged decrepitude is bad, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, other stuff, just like, you know, the books I've read like 300 books in the last few years. So of course I'm going to be a little bit more knowledgeable about certain things.
So it occurs to me that despite the don't tell people what to do and don't give advice being in the air, I do have a piece of advice, and it has to do with aging. And that is something I now realize that's been really important to me to keep handy at all times as I've been getting older, which is don't be bitter. Don't get bitter. Don't appear bitter. Because if you're young and bitchy, it looks like a pose, and it's just can be tolerated. If you're old and bitter, it's awful. It is so unbecoming. It's so undignified. Nobody likes it. It's horrible to be around. It eats you from the inside. And it's also, as you get older, you have a lot to be bitter about. Probably a lot's not going to go your way. Your body's going to start getting tired and hurt all the time.
Yep.
Your health is just going to get worse and worse and worse as you watch people who, I mean, literally, this is what getting older is like. Your body starts to decay as you watch people take for granted how good their health is. And that's everything. And at a certain point, so much of your consciousness is consumed by your health. Going to the doctor, taking pills, making sure you get out and walk because your doctor told you to, not because it's something you enjoy doing, incorporating weird things into your habits to stave off dying, while people who are young don't give a fuck and they don't have to.
Yeah.
So getting bitter is a pretty organic thing to do. Like you have every reason to get bitter, but it does nobody any good, despite how easily it can come to people who get old.
Well, that's one of the things at the opening of the show I was talking about, how I think you can slide into being worse really easily. Yeah. And I think it's like you have to fight against it. Otherwise, you're going to be like, no one wants to be around a bitter old person.
No, nobody wants to hear you bitch about how music isn't as good as it was when you saw the Ramones at CBGB's. Like, legitimately, nobody cares. It is fucking tiresome.
Yeah, but everyone loves that video of that 85-year-old man dancing to rave music.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Totally. Like everybody's totally stoked to be around that guy.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like, yeah, that's something
There's tons of cool shit. Just get your head out of your ass and go eat some overpriced bittersweet chocolate and have a good day. What were you about to say? Sorry.
No. I was just thinking about, like, you know, back to the aging thing is like, I've pretty much, the best thing I've learned how to do is figure out the kind of person I don't want to be and avoid the things that make me be that kind of person. Yeah. And then what I'd like to do is just step it up and like become the person I'd like to be, not just avoiding the person I worry about being. Yeah. And so maybe that'll be like 2020.
That's great. For me, that just mostly has to do with having hair on my head, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, but you look cool bald, so you're fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. I feel like this episode has been way more self-help for not. This episode proves why it's a good idea that we started Self-Help for Nihilists as a splinter podcast. Yeah. Because mostly this is where we end up. Yeah. Is like not talking about narrative structure, but talking about morality.
Well, I mean, one of the things is I've been through the 3 or so years that we've done Scary Thoughts, is I've gone so deep into the weeds of reading about narrative whatever and philosophy and all this stuff. And like, I never leave the other side of reading any of that stuff with an improved life in any way. Like, it never fucking happens. But I go like, you know, cinch up my pants and do the artist way for a few months. And then yet again, my life changes radically for the better. Like, so it's like, okay, well, why am I like trying to read Nick Land? You know, like that is not going to do anything for my life. You know, if anything, it'll probably put me in the orbit of really miserable fucking people.
Well, he spun out into becoming a white supremacist. Did he? There you go.
Oh, see, there you go.
That's where that leads.
That's what happens. One thing you're writing One minute you're writing about like, necrotic meme structures, and then next thing you know, you're a fucking Klansman. So avoid all postmodern writing, folks.
Almost. Actually, speaking of improved life, I read for about an hour or 2 hours every morning before I do anything. And I hit this wall that I think I was talking to you about. Like, I was trying to read philosophy every morning, and I just read the beginnings of the first, whatever pages of a series of philosophy books that all just made me so fucking angry that started making me hate philosophy. So I've just been reading fiction every morning. It's funny. God, this is getting back into life advice stuff, but it's funny. In 2019, I went from having this moment of seriously considering going back to school and finishing the philosophy degree that I walked away from to going, I think I never want to read philosophy ever, ever, ever again, and just want to enjoy reading for a change.
Yeah, dude. Some stuff's, I feel like,
I know that 2020 will have me going back to Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Judith Butler, but in the meantime, I just want to read Audrey Niffenegger.
But the thing about Kierkegaard and Nietzsche is like they're a little bit more in the self-help direction.
For sure.
You would leave.
Absolutely.
Go read like Thus Spake Zarathustra, and you're going to be all weirdly fired up. To me, that book is so similar to reading Bhagavad Gita. I feel the same after like reading those two things. But yeah, I don't know. Like my jam lately has just been like in the morning I read Tolstoy has this book called the One Year Calendar or something like that, and it's basically a couple quotes that he liked and then some exposition that he wrote about that quote, and you just read a little bit every morning, and it's usually pretty good advice.
That's cool.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just start reading like really soft Oprah novels.
Why not?
Yeah. I wonder what that would feel like if you were like went from reading serious dark shit and you made an effort to be like, okay, I'm only going to read like Oprah's top 100 books this year.
I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah. Huh.
Someone else do it and tell us about it.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Let's fade to black and roll the credits. Join the mailing list at scarythoughts.org. We will see you next time for Joker from 2019. And thanks for listening.
Yep.